Hey, this is John with Two Moose Home Inspections. Let's talk about defensible spaces and how we can protect your home. Welcome to Inspector Insights. So how are we going to make defensible spaces at our house? Well, first, let's take a look at this example. It's asking, what is a defensible space? This is, and this is not. And why is that? Because if a flame were to come through, it would then come into this bush, it would then get into all these ladder fuels that would bring it up into the canopy, and then we'd have an extremely uncontrollable fire. And so what is defensible? Well, over here, if I was the same flame and I worked my way over, then what would happen is I could actually come around the base of all the trees and there's no ladder fuels to bring me up into the canopy. And so at the bare minimum, there's just going to be a brush fire and then maybe something a little bit more severe, but we aren't going to have an out of control fire. I have the ability that I can strike a line and I should be able to stop that fire from moving any further. So it's very, very important that we understand that in here, no matter what I did, the fire is going to jump from space to space to space, and there's no room for me to be able to stop that fire. And it also, as a fire person, would be very, very dangerous for me to be inside of here, where here I have a lot of egress, a lot of way to get out, and I also have a lot of work that can be done in here to make sure that things that aren't supposed to be burning are not burning. So if we take a look at this house over here, you can see that we have our fire crew right here. And so these guys are basically working the ground. And then we have a very high value asset right here. And there's a few things that I like, and there's also a few things that I don't like in this picture. But what I really do like is if you take a look over here, it appears as if there's also already some type of natural fire break in the ground, where even if we had a small grass fire, it's not necessarily going to move the direction towards the house. Additionally, if you see, we have all of this open space. And what do we do with all of this open space right here? Well, that gives us the ability to control the fire and prevent it from jumping from canopy to canopy in that forest. If you look at the size of this person, and then you compare that to the size of these flames, there is no way that we have an ability for this one person to control this one fire. But if we are able to have a small ground fire, then we can control it. But the thing that I see here that I don't like is that you see these trees that are so close to the house. If these trees' canopies were to catch on fire, then the house would be at risk of catching on fire. However, with this large break here, the odds of that occurring, aside from an ember flying over and falling onto these trees, is relatively low. Additionally, if you look at this house has a metal roof. And that metal roof, if an ember were to fall onto that roof, is much less likely to have a fire start because of that, which is really, really, really an important thing. So if we move on to the next picture, take a look at this. We had a fire, and the fire climbed up and was in all of these trees up in the canopy, and we also had the ground fire, but this house was left completely untouched. And there's a lot of reasons why that occurred. And one of the things that you need to keep in mind is that zone 1, in that immediate zone right there around the house, what are the things that you can do to make sure your house is safe? Well, one of the things is that a risk with fire is that embers can fly over and they can land on things. So an ember is in the air, it's floating, and it falls down onto something. So let's say that an ember falls down right here in between the chimney and this roof line. That could get really superheated, and then it could start to catch the roof on fire, and then the house would be on fire. So another thing that could happen is that we could have a vent. We could have inside of our windows a screen where the screen is not either made of metal because they have metal screens and they have plastic screens. If you have a metal screen and an ember falls onto that metal screen, then it'll just fall right down, no big deal. If you have a plastic screen, it could catch the screen on fire. Additionally, that ember, if you have a damaged screen, can pass right through that screen, and then it can sit on the windowsill and start to catch that window on fire. So we want to make sure that our vents have proper screens to make sure we aren't pulling embers into the house. We want to make sure that our shingles are very good. And are we using shingles that are asphalt shingles, wood shingles, metal roofing? What are we doing on this house to make this house a little bit more protected from fires? Additionally, the siding. What kind of siding is this? Is this wood? Is this vinyl? Or is this more like a hardy board, some type of cement-based siding, something that doesn't necessarily catch on fire? So what can we do as far as house construction? Well, if you already have the house, then more than likely we're past the point of being able to do anything from a construction standpoint to make the house better. And again, this is not an end-all be-all on how is it that I create a defensible space and protect the house. What this is just a general discussion to invite you into the topic so that way you can be an active participant in your home's protection. So if we look here, we can take care of some of our landscaping, and that landscaping can prevent these grass fires from coming over and going underneath the deck or going too close to the house. You see, we don't have any combustible materials around the house. On this particular picture, what you might notice is that all the way over here is where we have all of our firewood. So all of our firewood is all the way over here. It's not next to the house. So many times, and we call this out every single time, so many times whenever we are at somebody's house, we will see firewood stacked on a wooden deck right up against the house, and we're talking a big stack of firewood. And so whenever you have that, if an ember were to fall into that dry, pre-cut wood ready to be burned, it's going to catch your whole house on fire. So in this immediate zone, we want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can, such as maintaining your deck. If you are putting a protectant on your deck every single year, then that means that the wood is not going to split and open itself up to embers to be able to catch on fire. There are just so many things that can be done with a house. And what you want to keep in mind is that this should not be considered a defensible space. This is your last stitch effort to protect your house. If everything else has failed and you did this correctly, maybe the house can be saved. If everything else fails, maybe the house can be saved. But if you don't do any of this and everything else fails, the house is going to be gone. Pretty much guaranteed. So it's very important to understand that this whole idea of defensible space, it's really just good landscaping, good hardscaping, and taking care of the property and maintaining the property and getting rid of things that don't need to be there. I think it's pretty obvious that if in this area you have firewood right up against your house is at more of a risk of catching on fire. However, it's inconvenient to have to go further to get firewood. So some people don't necessarily have that conversation of, well, it is inconvenient to get the firewood, but the risk of catching on fire during the summer is extreme. So maybe during the winter, I can stack up firewood, but then during the summer, I need to remove that firewood. Maybe that would be an appropriate solution. But the main thing is being educated and knowing that there is a thing called a defensible space is actually your first step. What we're going to do next on this next episode is we're going to talk about Zone 2 right over here. And Zone 2 and what we do in that 5 to 30 foot range. That is going to be on the next episode.